What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on, everybody? I know what's going on in Vegas. Lincoln Riley shuts guys like me up, has a massive win for the program. No way around it. Obviously, beating LSU as it wasn't a huge underdog, but I don't know anyone who was betting on the Trojans, and they came to play. Miller Moss, the defense, Anthony Lynn's son, D'Anton Lynn, who he stole from UCLA. The Trojans can tackle. USC can tackle. They were showing the visuals. We'll dive into the Trojans. Brian Kelly was paid $95 million to win national championships. 3 coaches at LSU have won national championships since 2003. Saban, Ogeron, and Les Miles. And listen, with the 12-team playoff, obviously it's a little more open, but man. So we'll dive into the game. Just a bunch of other stuff. Dabo, Swinney taking a lot of shit. I think people are overcomplicating this transfer portal. It's about one simple thing that he's screwing up on. Talk about some of these young quarterbacks. I watched an unhealthy amount of football. Didn't really move. Actually, I went to the gym, and at the gym, I watched more football. But Miami absolutely destroyed Florida. They look pretty good. But their coach is Mario, so you never know. A lot of young quarterbacks excelling, and then just some big picture thoughts on some of the NFL prospects, the SEC versus the Big Ten, which I might have to change my take after watching tonight. But, man, college football is back. That was fun. It's just game after game with like 7 games going on at once. Like, I want to watch this. You got YouTube TV, 4 boxes. You're clicking over here. My Fresno State Bulldogs gave Michigan a game until they didn't. But we'll dive into it all. But do you want to go to one of these games? It felt like a USC home game tonight. If you want to go to any game, college, pro, concerts, comedy shows, you name it, I got you covered. My friends at Gametime. Just download the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app. Go to anything you want. And I'm even giving you a little deal. $20 off right now. So if you want to go enjoy yourself, get out of the house, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Okay, let's dive into the story of the night. It's Lincoln Riley. And I'll take the L. I'll take the egg on my face. I thought they were a 6-6, 7-5 team. I thought they were a team that was going to have major issues, right? I mean, last year, what we witnessed was like an NBA team that to win games depended on their star player to score 45 and 50 a night. And they had Caleb Williams. And sometimes he could do it, and sometimes he couldn't. But defensively, they couldn't tackle anybody. They were bad. I mean, they were, and really USC's defense now has been bad for a while. But the transformation that we'll dive into Miller Moss, who definitely surprised me. Like most people, he had never really played. You didn't know what to make of it. Anytime you have a young quarterback, I think the jury is out until they prove it. But the story of the night was the defense. And hiring Anthony Lynn's son, I got news for you, D'Anton Lynn. If they look like that all season long, he's going to be a college head coach next year. He's coached in the NFL. He worked for the Ravens. He excelled for Chip Kelly last year at UCLA. His star pass rusher went in the top 20 to Indy, Latu. And tonight, whatever the hell he was doing and preaching for the last 7-8 months worked. They showed the visuals of these guys' bodies. Part of it with USC. And listen, some of us West Coasters go, I don't think you realize how physical and big Pete Carroll's team was. I understand it's a long time ago, but they were massive. They dominated on defense. It's why they ran the country. It wasn't offense clearly was sexy. They had Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart winning Heisman's. But defensively, they had first-round picks in every unit. They had a ton of them on at linebacker and a defensive line. They hit you right in the teeth. And then Lincoln Riley comes. You're like, these guys look like me. Like, how are you going to beat anyone with a bunch of little tiny dudes? And then they show tonight the transformation. I guess they stole some guy from Vanderbilt, and that worked. The strength program, whatever they're feeding these kids, the Jamba Juices, the protein shakes, the body types, guys were going from 235 to 260. And just on television, it jumped off the screen. The other thing was the open field tackling. USC has tackled like a Mountain West team for years. And it's like we hold them to such high esteem because of the program, because of the history, because they give Lincoln Riley $120 million. And then they're playing Arizona and they can't tackle anybody. You're like, what's happening? And you watch tonight, that first drive of the game, you're like, God, I don't know. And then they settled in and they consistently tackled all night long. So Lincoln Riley makes a change at defensive coordinator, hires a crosstown rival DC, and it immediately paid dividends. I mean, they're playing a team that has, I'm texting around trying to get the draft grades on these guys. The left tackle, Will Campbell for LSU, top 15 pick. The right tackle, a little bit of a raw product, more than likely a first rounder. Obviously, their quarterback, I mean, to me, he looks like an NFL guy. Lacey had to be the best third wide receiver in the country last year, playing with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, Jay Daniels played on an all-star team last year, and they handled it, man. They did. And the other thing is, because LSU travels so well, despite it being in Vegas, which is a 4 or 5 hour drive from Southern California, that felt like an LSU home game. And for USC, the pressure on that program, I thought this before the game kicked off. The pressure on these two coaches in this game were immense. It's year 3, and this isn't like 15, 20, 30 years ago, where it takes 3 or 4 years to truly even evaluate a guy. You can flip it like that. The transfer portal, the world is completely different. Your ability to flip a program has never been easier because of the modern day rules. Brian Kelly got $95 million. Lincoln Riley got $120 million. The standard for these guys was like, be competitive, win 8, 9 games. It was like to win national championships. In year 1 and 2, obviously last year for both guys, the defenses were horrendous. They had the number 1 and number 2 overall quarterbacks in the draft, and neither one of them sniffed the Final Four. USC had no shot, and Brian Kelly couldn't stop a nosebleed. So you're like, there's tangible pressure in this game. Because of the 12-team playoff, it doesn't make or break your season. But for as great of a win that is for Lincoln Riley, and that's a fantastic win. I mean, that's as good as it's his best win at it's a short tenure, but it's one of the biggest wins of his career. I mean, there's no way around that, right? Neutral site against LSU when he's an underdog. That was massive. It's equally a pretty big loss for LSU. You have all this talent. Clearly, defensively, they weren't as bad as they were last year, but something's missing. They don't look like the dominant SEC program that, some of the teams that Les Miles had and obviously Nick Saban had. Those days are long gone. And you could argue maybe those days are long gone just in general in college football. But how does this team, 9-3 feels like best case scenario, and here's the problem. If USC's 9-3, which if you look at their schedule, like they're going to drop a random game. To me, the Notre Dame game's kind of advantage Notre Dame. Michigan, kind of a coin flip because Michigan's clearly not as good. But let's just say they go 9-3 and LSU goes 9-3. And basically one of the last playoff spots is between those two teams. Well, USC gets the spot. They beat them straight up. Like that's how it happens, right? I mean, we don't even need to argue that. And I thought if USC lost this game, looking at their schedule, probably 8-4. I look at them now like a 9-3 team. And Miller Moss, that was really impressive. I mean, my expectations for him were 0, didn't have any, and they probably weren't positive. Halfway through the game, you're like, God, I kind of like this guy. By the end of the game, you're like, God, that guy's a gamer. Both the quarterbacks. They played winning football. I know Nussmeier threw the pick at the end of the game, and it's crazy is when my first year at Fresno State in 2008, Doug Nussmeier, his dad was the offensive coordinator. I love Nuss. I saw him at the Combine this year. He's currently the Eagles quarterback coach. He's been kind of Kellen Moore. Those guys have been together since Dallas. He was a quarterback coach for Dak, and then he went to the Chargers with Kellen, and then he went with the Eagles. He's a stud. So I was rooting for him. But something about Brian Kelly, not the most, I don't know, easily rootable individual. So something just a little off. He's always kind of screaming at people. But the expectations for him, like even if Lincoln had gone 7-5 this year, nothing's going to happen. To me, the Brian Kelly thing last year was such a disappointment because their offense, it's impossible to get better on offense. Their offense legitimately was like the Joe Burrow 2019 year. And I think statistically, it's like the greatest offense in the history of the sport. But from a talent standpoint, very similar. Star wide receivers, top 5 pick. Another guy, top 25 pick. Lacey's probably a top 50 pick. 2 tackles, stars, quarterback, NFL guy, running backs. Like, well, I don't know. One thing that jumped out to me, and I'm not pretending to be Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay here. Deep passes and long breaking routes down the field, even when you have great athletes, are difficult to complete. One thing USC did a good job of tonight is some quick hitters across the middle. They got rid of the ball fast out of Miller Moss's hands. Yet it felt like, and Doug Nussmeier, or not Doug, but Garrett Nussmeier, his statistics were really good, but they were asking him to kind of play like Patrick Mahomes. Why don't you run some quick hitting routes and let your great athletes, I don't know, a 7-yard out. Well, if the guy breaks a tackle, it turns into 40 yards. Run a slant route. If the safety takes a bad angle, could be 26 yards. And they're just, their offense, a little weird. And they got going for a little bit running the ball, but when you have 2 NFL tackles, you think you could be pretty good, on the ground, like dominate on the ground. And maybe that's a testament to USC bulking up the defensive line, adding some guys in the transfer portal. USC has a guy, this has to be the only time this has happened during this transfer portal era, and I can't imagine it happening anytime soon. Number 81, Ford, the wide receiver, started his career at USC, transferred to UCLA, and now he transferred back to USC. Like, we've seen a lot of guys do the 3-team transfer, start somewhere, go another place, go another place. But this guy came home. Maybe home is where the heart is. Herb Street mentioned it. It is cool in this kind of day and age when all these guys are bouncing around left and right and everyone's taking the most money. I don't blame them. But just 2 kids that got passed over, had to buy their time, got to eventually start, play their first game. Notre Dame A&M did 8 million people. UGA Clemson did 7.9, and Miami, Florida did 6.6 million on Saturday. I think it's fair to say we're going to have well over 10 million people watching that game. These 2 guys waited years as the backup, get to play in front of, it's going to be one of the highest rated games of the year, given it's Sunday night, nothing else on TV. And both of them excelled. What a cool moment for some of the old school football guys. And listen, I'm not anti-transfer portal, but I also don't just think everyone jumping around like there's a reason you're not starting. It's like, it's kind of cool to be the starting quarterback. Like, you got to go to USC and LSU. Like, it's kind of a big deal. Maybe one day it'll be your turn. And when it is, it's pretty fucking badass. So props to those 2 guys. But like I said, man, what a win for Lincoln and Brian Kelly, man. I think right now you'd have to bet against them making the playoffs. Right? Ole Miss, I like Ole Miss more. They definitely can be more prolific scoring-wise. Alabama, like Kalen DeBoer was just in the national championship. You could argue Kalen DeBoer currently is a better coach than Brian Kelly today. I know their resumes, Brian's accomplished a lot, but like today, who would you rather have? Kalen DeBoer or Brian Kelly? I'd take Kalen DeBoer. So LSU still has a lot of question marks, even if their defense, I guess, looks a little bit better from the previous year. NFL Week 1 is here, and a new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Fans have spoken. We want touchdowns. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly, plus 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. And get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Offer ends 9/9, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Let's hit on Dabo Swinney really quick because he's getting crushed. Georgia just curb stomped him. I mean, killed him. Got up early, was slamming coffee. The game kicks off. It was kind of close for a half. You're like, and I thought, Clemson, they've recruited really well. Backs against the wall. Not a soul in America that follows football thinks they have a chance. I'm like, eventually, aren't you going to play one of these games close? They kind of did, and then they didn't, and they got boat raced. And after, every person that covers college football, former players, media people, are crushing Dabo for the transfer portal thing. And I think they said during the game that Georgia might be 11. It's one of their bigger transfer portal classes of the Kirby tenure. The problem is not the transfer portal. Obviously, he should utilize that, and it would help. But the thing that has derailed Clemson as a program is quarterback play. He won a national championship with Deshaun Watson. He won a national championship with Trevor Lawrence. Before Deshaun Watson, ran off every massage therapist in the state of Texas, and his body started failing him. And Trevor Lawrence, we'll see how good he was, or turns out to be, still a lot of question marks there, was the number 1 pick in the draft. And Deshaun Watson was a guy after like 3 years, every team in the league except like 3 or 4 would have wanted. So those guys are legit NFL dudes leaving Dabo Swinney. From there, he went to DJ Ungule, who, everything I've heard, nice guy, probably an XFL player. And then he thought he was upgrading with Klubnik, who might just not be very good. And for the transfer portal, adding a guard here, a safety here, not disputing that would not help. It helps Bama. It helps Ohio State. It helps USC. It helps. You should utilize that. But when your quarterback play sucks or is not good enough against other NFL quarterbacks on other college teams like Georgia has, and that ultimately wasn't the difference in the game because Clemson was just overmatched, but they had no shot as the game went on with that quarterback. None. Zilch. So, Scott Frost, I saw today, just got hired. Who hired him? Oh, the Rams. Scott Frost, who had no equity with Nebraska beside he'd been a successful coach right at UCF and had played at Nebraska, but he didn't have equity of taking them to 10 and 11 win seasons, kind of staked it all on Adrian Martinez. And then it failed because Adrian Martinez turns out wasn't any good. So what happened? Scott Frost got fired. So usually coaches in this position get fired when they keep missing on the quarterback. Now, Dabo has so much equity going to 3 national championships, winning a couple, dominating for a while, but it's not going that well right now. And to me, everyone can talk about the transfer portal, but I promise you, when your quarterback is not good, you could have 10 NFL guys next to him. You're going to have problems in the tight games. So Georgia looks like a dominant program. Yeah, they are. But they also have an NFL quarterback who looks pretty damn good. Clemson does not. Same thing with Florida. Why is Billy Napier going to get run out of town? Well, his team's not very good. But the quarterback play is just Cam Ward was many thought the number 1 guy in the transfer portal. Got a bunch of money to go to Miami. Played at Washington State. Super freak, right? Can run, huge arm. Can make a mistake here or there, but his good is really good. What happens? Miami goes. They've dominated the transfer portal. They recruit well because Mario's a great recruiter, and they kill Florida. They dominate him. And now I think big picture, the question mark is Florida's going to open up. And an article came out about Lane Kiffin, hasn't had a drink in 3.5 years, is a new man. I don't think that was a random article. I think he's trying to change the perception nationally. Now, part of it, his daughter goes to Ole Miss. She wants him to stay. It sounds great. But I've been doing this long enough. These articles matter because the perception on Lane, he wanted the Oregon job a couple years ago. They wouldn't give him the time of day. Wouldn't entertain him because there's a lot of some question marks. But those have kind of subsided. He said, listen, no drinking anymore, no screwing around. Florida has an opportunity to be one of the best jobs in the country. And clearly Lane's killing it at Ole Miss. They're going to be, I mean, they are good. And that's just something I'm keeping an eye on big picture. Lane Kiffin, Florida. Maybe he just stays at Ole Miss for the rest of his career. I would say eventually Florida is going to have to get really, really serious. And when you start looking around, like, what are they going to do? Go after Urban Meyer? I would say Urban is dramatically more toxic after some of the situation, even at Jacksonville. He hasn't coached in a while. Like, Lane currently is kicking ass and taking names. I'm not saying Florida would turn down Urban, but doesn't Lane make way more sense now? And I'm not even know if Urban would want the job. One thing that is very, very evident is the young quarterback play all over the country. I looked at Arch Manning's class, the top 5 quarterbacks. Number 1 was Arch Manning, who doesn't get to play because Texas has Quinn Ewers. Number 2 was Nico. I can't say his last name, but Tennessee starting quarterback from Los Angeles. I got news for you. If you haven't seen him yet, just YouTube some of his throws from last week. You're going to see him throughout the season. It's his first year starting. I guess he started the bowl game. He's a big-time player. Some of these guys, for a lot of my life, most quarterbacks in college, I felt like had average arms. They were like, this is not NFL. When you just flip around the channels now, you go to like Tennessee, you're like, this 19-year-old guy named Nico is throwing 99-mile-an-hour bullets. I go to Nebraska, Riola, he's throwing just darts. I watched Oklahoma. It was either Thursday or Friday night. Jackson Arnold, who, listen, Dylan Gabriel is an excellent player, Oregon starting quarterback. Oklahoma told him he was not going to start anymore. They were going with Jackson Arnold, who was 5th in the class behind Arch Manning, Nico, who am I missing? Dante Moore, who is now the backup to Dylan Gabriel at Oregon, who was at UCLA last year. And number 4 is the guy, Malachi Nelson, started at USC. Lincoln ran him out of town, went to Boise, and he couldn't even win the job. So can't hit on them all. But that class looks like it's got a chance. 3 of the 4 guys, pretty talented. And who knows, we'll have to wait and see with Arch. But Jackson Arnold and Riola, you talk about the ability to move, throws down the field, accuracy. They got some swag. They got some like panache. They just got some shit to them. They're just same with Nico. Just a very, very enjoyable, easy watch. Very easy watch. Historically, a lot of these guys, sometimes they were at some of these schools that were throwing up a bunch of points, like a Mike Leach school, a Hawaii. Now these guys, and I think a lot has to do with 7-on-7 camps. These guys are throwing. A lot of these guys only play football. You know, people my age in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, if you're a great athlete, you played it all. You were on the football. If you're the quarterback, then you probably played, you were the point guard or the shooting guard, and then you were the shortstop. Most of these guys now quit the other sports and just play football. I saw Nico actually play a little volleyball on the side. Check out his volleyball highlights. They look incredible, but these guys master their craft. It's like Tiger Woods. Like, what was Tiger Woods doing when he was 14? He was just playing golf. He was isolating at the sport, which obviously is very unhealthy for 99% of people because you're never going to play past high school. But when you have like pro potential like these kids, it can be a huge advantage, especially if, you know, you love it and you're an addict, you're not going to burn out. You hit the ground running and you look like a star. So the young quarterback talent in this country right now, these guys aren't even draft eligible, right? Not even draft eligible. And they just look like studs. Some of the guys that are draft eligible, Arizona's wide receiver, McMillan, he's just a massive guy with incredible ball skills who can make people miss, and dominated on Saturday night. He had 304 yards and 4 touchdowns. And honestly, it felt like more. And everyone I've talked to in the NFL, there's only one question mark on him, is like true top end speed, right? To be like a top 2 or 3 overall pick. You know, Calvin Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, these guys had elite speed. Malik Neighbors last year, you've seen like, trying to think guys, and Julio Jones, but I think he's got a very, very good chance to be a top 10 wide receiver, or a top 10 player in this draft at wide receiver, and be the number 1 wide receiver off the board. Travis Hunter in Colorado, Shador. I think there's no disputing, and Colorado plays Nebraska this week. Talk about a great game. Riola versus Shador. Dion at, Omaha, wherever the hell University of Nebraska is. I don't think it's in Omaha, but Lincoln, Nebraska. That's going to be must watch. Shador, there's no arguing that he has number one overall pick talent, right? The arm strength, the accuracy, the mobility, obviously the genes he comes from. Uh, he's he's a very, very intriguing player. And I would say he's a lock top 20 pick as of right now. But these next, 10 games playing real teams, he played North Dakota State, which is an excellent program. You don't determine your draft stock out of that. If I'm a GM watching you play in February, I never even watched that game. Same thing with Travis Hunter. Now, Travis Hunter was already viewed as a top 5 pick, like a borderline lock. I think the hard part with Travis Hunter is all the scouts want him to play corner, rightfully so. It's way harder to find corners than wide receivers. Look like the last 5 drafts. There's been an unlimited amount of wide receivers every year in like the first round, let alone all the good players that go in the second and third round. There haven't been many high end, plug and play Sauce Gardner, Derek Stingley types. So they want him to play corner. The problem is, if you're Travis Hunter, think about this. Brandon Ayuk, who got 75 balls, just got $75 million guaranteed. The money these wide receivers are making, it's like $30 million plus a year. The top corners, now maybe that changes with Sauce and Stingley, and I would guarantee this. Their agents are going to try to change that, as they should. But right now, there's a big gap financially. Now, the rookie contracts, all the same. Everyone makes the same money, right, based on your slots. Like if you're drafted number 3 overall, whether you play corner, left tackle, quarterback, you're getting the same contract no matter what. But that second contract is something to think about. My question is, can he really play both ways all season long and do it at a high level? Last year, he got hurt, kind of ran out of gas. Clearly, I think they're going to try it. What does that look like when they play Arizona and he's going up against a top 10 wide receiver? And he's also playing all the snaps on offense. He's like the Shohei Ohtani for college football. The most remarkable thing I've ever seen. We've seen a lot of guys, quote unquote, slashes, right? A defensive player that would get some offensive snaps. It was usually that way. You don't see many offensive players also getting defensive snaps. But like Dion, Charles Woodson, guys who were defense, got to play a little offense. This guy goes both ways. It's like high school. It's like if you just went to like Alabama or LSU or Ohio State's best high school recruit this year at a skill position like wide receiver or corner, I guarantee you they're going both ways. I play running back and I play linebacker. Or I play wide receiver and I play safety. And I never come off the field besides special teams. That's what this guy's fucking doing. It's insane to watch. And some of his highlight plays, it was sweet. So Colorado, they're an entertaining watch. You can't argue that. It's just, they're playing on TV against a real team. I want to watch. Will Johnson, speaking of top corners, if Travis decided to play corner, and who knows if he ever even quote unquote declares, maybe he just goes into the draft as an athlete. Will Johnson, I think, is viewed as the top corner right there with Travis Hunter. Had an unreal pick 6 against Fresno State. Who, give the Dogs some credit. They went in to Ann Arbor, defending champs. Granted, they had an entirely new team and a new coach. Dogs have my guy, Tim Skipper. They were right in the game. But Michigan had a little bit more. Michigan's going to have some issues on offense. Quarterback play, pretty big question mark. But their defense is really good. And Will Johnson, I don't know how quote unquote long he is, but he's a top 15 corner, I would imagine. Anything else? It really is crazy the popularity right now of the sport of football, and whether that's gambling, whether that's kind of the fantasy football generation of people wanting to watch star wide receivers, star quarterbacks, but seeing some of these numbers. 8.2 million people watching Notre Dame A&M. 8 million people watching Georgia Clemson. If you told me 12 million people watched tonight, I'd believe you. Like college football, and Colin's been talking about this for a long time, is it used to be so regional, right? It was just The South was having so much success. Well, now the South is cool. Nico, Tennessee quarterback from Los Angeles. Georgia's leading rusher against Clemson from Los Angeles. All these guys, it was a big deal, I remember growing up. If one of our star high school recruits in Northern California left the Pac 12, Brady did it to Michigan. DJ Williams did it to Miami. But for the most part, if you weren't going to USC, UCLA, Cal, or Stanford, Oregon or Washington, maybe Colorado. But you weren't going to Alabama or Georgia. Now look at Georgia. They're starting a running back. It's from Los Angeles. Brock Bowers is from Napa. I've been saying this for a while. Saban changed the game financially for all these coaches because college football has become more popular, and he was the leading bus driver for the success. But he also made the SEC really cool. He made it cool outside of the South. Like, I think it's cool. Spent 37 years of my 39 years on the West Coast. And I'm infatuated with the SEC. It has the best players, right? The SEC just resonates. And one of the things in the tweet I saw about the ratings, Stuart Mandel, those were ABC games. Well, guess what ABC did? They bought the SEC. Now, their song leading into the SEC game may be pretty cheesy and maybe pretty bad, but it's going to work because this isn't just people in Mississippi and Alabama and Arkansas watching these games. I watched every second. I'm sure many people listening watch bits and pieces of a lot of them, and we're living all over the country. And when I look at the SEC and the Big Ten, and this is going to be an argument, especially now because of the power of the two conferences, the SEC is much better. Now, I know USC beat them tonight, and that was a big deal. But I watched the Big Ten. Their quarterback play is not great right now. Michigan's quarterback plays down, and then the random teams. And that's where the SEC, like their random teams, have NFL quarterbacks because they've been stealing so many of these quarterbacks from the West Coast. Where did Lane Kiffin get his quarterback? Jackson Dart, USC. So it's like now Texas A&M's quarterback, he was one of the worst players I saw all weekend long for a good player. And I text a buddy in the NFL. I'm like, what's the deal with these two quarterbacks? He said the two most overrated guys coming into the season for quote-unquote draft prospects. Now, Leonard, the Duke transfer for Notre Dame, he's like a poor man's version of Cam Newton. He's so big and he can run guys over, but throwing's very hit or miss. Like, I don't view that guy like an NFL thrower as of today. And A&M's quarterback, I mean, looked like he should be at UC Davis. Now, the defense in those games, and that's the other thing, the defense, now the Big Ten has good defense too, but the physicality of the SEC right now, and really all the Power 5 high-end schools, is really high. And the hitting in that game kind of felt like NFL light. Guys were getting crunched. Notre Dame schedule a joke. They'll probably cruise the playoffs. But that was an impressive win on the road. Now, the other quarterback couldn't complete a pass to save his life, but still, wins a win on the road against an SEC team. Anything else? Oregon was pretty bad. I didn't watch much of that game just because I don't even think it matters. But overall, man, we got a lot of NFL talent. And that's the other thing. A rising tide lifts all boats. The popularity, it all bleeds into each other, right? The NFL's popularity, the draft's popularity, college football's popularity, they're all interconnected. Because when you're watching tonight, Garrett Nussmeier, like he's going to get drafted. When you're watching Lacey and the two tackles and some of the dudes on USC and guys over the weekend in any of the big games, you're like, that guy's an NFL player. That guy's an NFL player. What round's this guy going to go? And the power of that is just taking this all to a new level. And we can add the gambling, I don't know, fantasy in college doesn't really exist, but it's all part of each other. It's all in the same, network. It's all under the same umbrella. And it's why football is lapping everybody right now. You look at basketball, it's all disconnected. The best players in the NBA are Euros, right? AAU's a joke. No one cares about the G League. College basketball only matters for the bracket. Baseball, it's all out of whack. but it all has to be interconnected. I love golf. Talk about a sport that's all over the map. When everyone is connected, even if college has their issues, the NFL kind of has some of their issues. I mean, I can't get over the more and more I think that the NFL is playing a game in Brazil. I'm not anti-expansion, but just talking to some people, it's absolutely ludicrous. I mean, it's insane that they're doing it. It really is. If you saw AJ Brown's quote, he's like, "Yeah, they kind of told us we can't take our phone outside. Like, I'm just going to stay in the hotel." Fucking the Brazil guy just banned Twitter. It's like, well, what are we doing? Just play the game in Lambeau or Philly. And if you want to go international, go to London. You're going to fucking Brazil. What are we trying to prove here? But regardless, I mean, we can nitpick anything. The NCAA, I haven't watched Connor Stallion's documentary yet, but I did see some clips from the NCAA chick that was grilling him. It's like I couldn't even imagine, even if I'm Connor Stallions and guilty, taking her seriously. But regardless, like the two entities got some issues, but where they don't have issues is when the game's on for 4 quarters, people all around this country are glued. And I love football as much as most, but I thought this weekend, the talent out there, the entertainment value, the matchups, been saying forever, we need LSU USC. Like you shouldn't be able to play. Maybe, you can play a Fresno State, a Boise, but playing some of these like FBS schools. Listen, North Dakota State should be in the Mountain West, and they're good and they would beat a lot of, Division I schools. But just in general, that practice needs to end. We just need teams playing other real teams because that's what the consumer wants. And when you give us awesome matchups, millions of people are coming. So we know that these television networks have more and more control because they're literally paying for everything, that they got to keep dropping the hammer of like, for the 3 weeks buffer before we start conference play, we got to play real games. I don't even care if they're close. Like Oregon, Idaho actually was a close game. That game should not be allowed to happen. It should not be allowed to happen. Especially now, Idaho bumped down divisions. When I was at Fresno State, they were in the WAC. They're not even that anymore. They were FBS or FCS. I get those mixed up. They were in the playoffs. I think they lost in the first round. They're playing like Sac State, and South Dakota State and Montana State. I have a lot of respect for those programs, but they shouldn't be allowed to play these teams. And this is why I think we're inevitably headed toward the big kind of NFL-style college football. Like in the NFL, you only play other NFL teams, right? Power 5 teams should only play other Power 5 teams. Or you get one group of 5 a year, or whatever. But you should not be able to play some of the teams that some of these schools are playing. And I understand some of these schedules are really hard. You look at whose schedule was I looking at? I was like, Jesus. Might have been Georgia's or Ole Miss. Some of these SEC schedules, some of these Big Ten schedules are difficult, right? If you have to play Ohio State, if you have to play Penn State, if you have to play Oregon, it's hard. That's not like playing, random teams. But still, we got to figure that out. But overall, fantastic week, and just I'm sweating. I'm so excited. So glad college football's back. NFL's right around the corner, and let's rock and roll, baby.